Welcome to PandaAudioBooks, the perfect place for a huge collection of fantasy novels. If you enjoy my content and want to support my work, a small contribution via PayPal is greatly appreciated. And don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and hit the notifications bell to stay updated with our latest audiobook chapters. Chapter 1271, Attack of the Insects. In that case, this old man won't dissuade you any further, Brother Han. The elderly coach driver chuckled and kept quiet. Han Li smiled and looked around him once before. Then he stood up from the tortoise without another word. Because the giant tortoise was at the center of the caravan, it had stopped in place. The other tortoise carriages also quickly gathered around it. Not long after, over 30 tortoise carriages circled around one another. The soldiers mounting large wolves gathered together in a group numbering over 50, creating a defensive perimeter around them. A large man with a scarred face was leading them, and strangely enough, the young blue-robed woman was mixed among them with a crimson tiger crouched at her side. Bird cries sounded from a distance and seemed to be growing closer and more fervent as time passed by. Several small crimson birds soon appeared and continuously circled in the air. The scarred man harshly shouted, "Prepare to fight. Have the tortoises lay down in full defensive positions." With that said, the tortoise drivers cracked a whip above the tortoises' heads, and the tortoises each slowly crouched down, then withdrawing their head and legs into their huge shells. They appeared the same as large azure boulders. The sound of quaking earth sounded from far away, with large clouds of dust spitting out from the ground and surging towards them. The scarred man's face turned icy and he wordlessly waved his hand. The cavalrymen raised their wolf-tooth clubs in a trained manner. When Han Li saw this, a trace of surprise appeared from his face, but before he could think more of the matter, he saw something that left him surprised. The scarred man suddenly tossed a green medicine pill into his mouth, soon letting out a large yell after. Yellow light circulated through his body and thin yellow fur spouted forth from his skin, turning his irises into a deep green. Afterwards, he knocked his feet against the wolf he mounted, and the wolf immediately shot forward with a roar. The other cavalrymen hadn't undergone such a strange transformation, but by circulating their own techniques, light shined from their bodies and they followed after their leader in a fearless charge. Several tens of cavalrymen swept up a dust cloud as they charged forward. What's going on? Could it be this person is a metamorphosed demon beast? Impossible, he would have to be a demon beast at a metamorphosed stage. He can't be such a high-grade demon cultivator. And from the soldiers' lack of reaction, this sight is common in the spirit realm. It appears that I'll need to spend more time in the spirit realm to understand it. Regardless, the scarred man's transformation and those so-called spirit bodies are something I've never heard of in the mortal realm. In his surprise, his thoughts quickly churned, quickly discovering there were quite a few differences in this world compared to the mortal realm. At that moment, the scarred man led the troops over a kilometer away from the caravan to meet the roiling dust clouds. Soon after, sounds of battle and shouts followed, but only the central part of the dust clouds was stopped. The sides split off and continued to charge in the direction of the caravan. In the blink of an eye, dust drifted over the soldiers and concealed them. Attack! It was unknown who let out the first shout, but following that, the guards that remained at the caravan raised their bows and began to release their arrows. A rain of arrows launched from the caravan. Muffled thuds sounded as the arrows landed and the dust cloud's momentum was greatly slowed. But soon after, the clouds rolled away as several black silhouettes pounced from the dust to reveal yellow worms that were 3 meters long. They each appeared quite flat and had massive mouths on their heads. They also had a pair of antennae waving around from the top of their heads. These were the so-called sandbug beasts. When Han Li saw them, this face faintly changed. He exterminated countless such demon beasts during his time in the scattered star seas, but they were far more deadly and powerful than the current worms before him. As soon as the worms appeared, the sound of tearing winds sounded, followed by the glint of a dozen arrows piercing into the worms. But apart from one arrow striking at one of their mouths, the rest of the injuries didn't seem to be lethal. Rather, they only further incited the worms. Regardless of the blood leaking from their bodies, they pounced onto the nearest tortoise. The 4 guards on the tortoise remained calm and brandished their blades to meet the attack. It was clear they cultivated a peculiar technique. Although they weren't able to defeat the worms in one fell sweep, each of their strikes left long gashes on the worms' bodies, forcing them to the ground. For a time, the huge worms twitched on the ground, suffering from their heavy injuries. But then, more giant worms emerged from the dust clouds, slowly trickling out in an unending streak. In the blink of an eye, the caravan found themselves surrounded. Naturally, a huge battle erupted. Shouts and dancing blades were abruptly mixed together, scattering blood in the air. At the center of the tortoise carriage, Han Li was in the most defended position, but apart from him and the carriage driver, there was no one else present. The 3 young women with him had disappeared at an unknown time. Having no need to worry about his safety for the time being, Han Li looked at the surrounding battle at his leisure. But a while later, he unconsciously frowned. It was as the old carriage driver said. Because of the worm's giant size, there was a limit to how high they could jump. Most of them could only jump at the side of the tortoise shells, not over them, granting the guards a prime opportunity to strike. As a result, the guards have had a massive advantage since the beginning. But due to the overwhelming number of worms, the yellow clouds have yet to disappear. It was impossible to see through their true numbers, but in such a short amount of time, over 300 worms have attacked the caravan. Although the worms' movements were clumsy, they each had rough hides and thick flesh. Even with a dozen slashes, the worms could continue to attack so long as none of their vitals were struck. The increasing numbers of worms meant that it was impossible to maintain a tight defense. Eventually, a few of them managed to jump over the tortoises and injure the guards. If one wasn't able to dodge out of the way, a guard would lose an arm to a huge worm's mouth. If a worm came from behind, it was possible to lose one's head. And when they managed to jump on top of the tortoises, they were also able to use their thick antennae as ferocious weapons. As time went on, the situation for the caravan worsened. The only peaceful areas were the several tortoise carriages at the center of the caravan, where Han Li happened to be. Han Li's gaze wandered for a moment and he turned his head, looking at another nearby carriage. It was the carriage that Nan Chizi and a few other cultivators entered a moment ago. As Foundation establishment cultivators, it should be easy to kill off these trifling insect beasts, but they've yet to perform the slightest action. These cultivators had no intention of taking action. Han Li frowned and turned back, continuing to watch the battle with a calm expression. At that point, over 20 of the guards were either dead or gravely injured by the worms, and the guards that remained began to appear exhausted. There would only be more casualties as time went on. If the scarred man didn't return with the cavalrymen soon, the caravan may not last much longer. However, Han Li wasn't worried about himself. Although Han Li wasn't able to use any magic techniques and his meridians weren't healed, he did cultivate the 4th layer of the bright jade arts. His body was incredibly durable. The teeth of the worms wouldn't be able to harm him. Moreover, he possessed 2 immortal vanquishing beads, something that could gravely injure deity transformation stage demon cultivators if he caught them off guard. As such, Han Li was able to observe the battle without worry. Not good. Elder Sister Xianxia, the situation looks bad. We should quickly act. A young woman's clear voice sounded from behind him. Han Li's expression stirred as he slowly turned around. One of the back of the huge tortoise, Xianxia, and the other young women had suddenly appeared. The 3 were holding onto a set of small flags. The red-clothed woman with an anxious expression, the youngest amongst them, was the one who spoke. The young green-robed woman said, "It is no matter. There is still time. Let us quickly place down the minor returning spring formation. Although we are missing Elder Sister Liua, we'll be able to hold it up for some time." The 3 then quickly stood in formation and took out a cloth the size of a basin. They placed it on the ground to reveal a meter-large spell formation diagram. Han Li watched this with an odd expression on his face. At that moment, the 3 women raised the small flags in their hand and revealed the bracelets around their wrists that were embedded with spirit stones. As the 3 chanted, the small flags and bracelets lit up and their wrists trembled. The 3 flags suddenly pierced into the formation diagram and emit faint spiritual chi fluctuations as it scattered white light around it. The white light swept past the surrounding guards and disappeared into their bodies. As a result, The guards were immediately reinvigorated. Not only did their exhausted appearances vanish, but an immense strength burst forth from their bodies. Their originally heavy weapons became nimble in their hands, flashing with cold light as they cut down the worms once more, gaining the advantage. When Han Li saw this, his mouth switched and he coldly smiled. The returning spring formation was a simplified version of the mortal realm's origin essence formation. Those affected by the formation may feel as if their energy was restored and may feel overwhelming power, but in truth, they are burning away their inner essence and shaving away at their lifespan. From how quickly the guards recovered, they spent around 20 or 30 years of their lifespan. Chapter 1272, Demon Serpent. Under the spell formation's effects, the situation reversed. It appeared they could hold out for a while longer. But just as Han Li was wordlessly watching the battle, something unexpected occurred. Following a loud bang, an explosion occurred near the three women. A demon beast with a serpent's body and a human head shot out from the sand. The demon serpent had a head of sickly yellow hair and a hideous woman's face. A pair of delicate infant white arms emerged from its side, each holding a meter-long bone spear. Black chi wrapped around the spears, revealing themselves to be low-grade magic tools. As soon as the demon serpent appeared, the three women controlling the formation turned pale with fright. The demon serpent turned to look at the women in charge of the formation and flashed a malevolent smile and wordlessly waved her spears. 3 black lights streaked from the spear and flew towards the women. The three were quick to react. They immediately recovered from their shock and took out the flags from the formation, hastily waving it in front of them. Several crackles sounded as a wave of mist suddenly appeared in front of them. The black lights flew into the mist, resulting in 3 large explosions. The mist scattered from the strike but managed to block the attack for Xianxia and the white-robed woman. However, the red-robed woman's mist was far weaker. When the black light struck the mist, her body trembled and she flew out into the air, away from the mist's protection. The red-robed woman knew things were far from good and she turned deathly pale. For a time, she wasn't able to control her own body. When the demon serpent saw this, it smashed down its tail and its body blurred, arriving below her with its spear held out. The other 2 women yelled out, but they weren't able to protect her. In the following moment, the woman was about to be stabbed by the glowing black bone spear. But at that moment, a piercing sound whistled through the air. A white object struck the spear with strange accuracy. Bang! The spear was pushed a half-foot away, brushing past the woman's clothes. The woman was left deathly pale with her brush from death, but she used the opportunity to regain control of her body. With a flip, she nimbly landed on the ground. The white object was an unremarkable stone. The demon serpent was surprised, but malevolent glint flashed from its eye and with its other arm, it released a chain of stabs. However, yet another whistling sound shrieked through the air. This time, a stone didn't strike the spear but pounded towards the demon serpent's head. The stone clearly carried an immense strength. If the attack truly struck the serpent, it might not shatter its skull, but it would be enough to leave it dazed at the very least. The demon serpent was enraged and had no choice but to turn its head to the side and use its spear and block the oncoming stone. But with a muffled thump, the serpent felt a huge force knock against its hand, forcing it back several steps. Enraged, it turned to look in the direction where the stone came from. A young man was looking down at it from the top of a nearby tortoise carriage. He was fiddling with a similar stone in his hand. It was Han Li. The red-robed woman had now arrived next to her companions in a blur and let out a sigh of relief. Having been foiled twice, the serpent felt immense rage and opened its mouth to release a black poisonous mist towards the 3 women. But then, Nan Chiz's voice sounded from one of the carriages. "Evil creature! You dare!" Soon after, the white light shot out from the carriage window. It circled once in the air before cleaving at the demon. It was a crystalline sword that was several inches large. When the serpent saw this, its expression changed and it ceased spitting its poison. It rushed to toss the spear in its hand with all its strength at the carriage it came from. It then twisted its body to duck into the sand. When it saw more cultivators appear, it didn't dare to fight and immediately flee. As for the spear, it was aimed at Han Li. Obviously, the demon thought to take revenge on the mortal that thought to ruin its fun and express its resentment. When Han Li saw the black light coming towards him, he wryly smiled. Not only did he not use the stone in his hand, but he also stood still in place. Boom! The spear struck Han Li accurately, and he was sent flying over 30 meters away, leaving a large hole in a carriage container he fell on. The crash resulted in twinkling blades falling out from a carriage storage. Ah! When the three women saw this, they let out a cry of alarm. As for Nan Chizi, he let out a yelp from a neighboring carriage. Afterwards, Nan Chizi's small sword circled in the air before turning to him. At that moment, the red-robed woman shook her flag and scattered her protective mist, then running over to the container. "Brother Han, are you all right?" she worryingly cried out. A trace of worry also appeared on the other two women's faces. "I am well. However, my body can't seem to move." Han Li spoke out with a wry chuckle. The three women were relieved to hear this and exchanged a glance. They all jumped on top of the giant tortoise in question and looked at the damaged container. They saw Han Li lying down on a pile of spears and sabers with town robes. He appeared helpless, but there were no obvious injuries. The three were overjoyed and dragged him out in a joint effort. "Brother Han, thank you for saving my life," the red-robed woman gratefully said. Han Li chuckled and casually answered, "It wasn't much. It only took a slight effort. However, the attack has left me helpless. I'll have to lay down for a moment longer." A trace of surprise appeared on his face and Nan Chizi smiled, saying, "There is nothing wrong. The Vajra arts is worthy of being of the 5 great body refining techniques. You are already so strong after cultivating the 3rd layer. That evil creature's magic tool wasn't what harmed Benefactor Han, but the exertion of the rock throwing has caused some injury to your meridians. It should be healed with some rest." "I am glad," the red-robed woman said with joy. Nan Chizi smiled and looked at the formation diagram that no longer glowed with light. He chuckled and said with a deeper tone, "How could this humble daoist lie? However, the situation will turn for the worse now that you've stopped driving the minor returning spring formation." When that was said, the three's expression vastly changed and they hastily looked around them. They saw that the guards have become exhausted once more without the aid of the formation, and they have resumed taking casualties. "Damn! We've only brought 1 copy of the formation diagram. We've used all the power from our formation flags to block the demon serpent. We won't be able to activate it again," the white-robed woman cried out. The other two looked at each other in dismay. "That is truly troublesome." The Daoist priest frowned. As they thought of a plan, they suddenly heard the sounds of battle around them stop. Suddenly, the guards let out a resounding cheer. The women looked around in surprise. They saw that the huge worms were jumping off the carriages and fleeing in a panic. They seemed to have lost all their previous mettle. "It is done. Sister Lua and the others must have defeated the insect demons," the green-robed woman said with a grin. The other two also wore pleasant expressions. As expected, several tens of cavalry were returning to the caravan, leaving dust clouds in their wake. Out of the 50-some cavalry that went out on the attack, only about 30 managed to return. Furthermore, many of them were injured and stained with blood. It was clear they had a desperate battle. When the wolf-mounted cavalry returned, the large scarred man tossed something on the ground. It was the head of a huge worm, but its body was entirely golden. The blue-robed woman leading the crimson tiger appeared entirely without injury. When the two saw Nan Chizi and the 3 women surrounding Han Li, they revealed a trace of shock. At that moment, one of the guards gave a detailed explanation of what happened. The scarred man soon let out a bellow. "It appears that I've made the right decision to take you into our organization. As soon as you joined, you already saved Kwana. If something truly happened, I wouldn't have the face to see the mistress." When the blue-robed woman heard this, she looked at Han Li with a friendly face. Han Li simply smiled back and said nothing else. Since they repelled the sandbug beasts, the troops needed to rest. After half a day, they resumed their journey. The rest of the way was remarkably peaceful. After 3 days, The caravan left the azure sifting desert and was met with an endless grassland. It was incredibly flat. With this, the speed of the caravan increased several times as the tortoises could walk with bigger steps. As for Han Li, he remained still on his back, unable to move. He later noticed that the banter from the caravan instantly went silent after they entered the grassland. In addition, the 4 women sitting the carriage looked at the grassland with an uneasy expression, faintly betraying a sense of dread. Chapter 1273, A Yuan City. Han Li leaned against the side of the carriage, sitting across from the 4 women. He was able to clearly see their unease. He already swept his gaze past the grasslands outside the carriage several times, but he found nothing out of the ordinary. It appeared similar to any ordinary grassland. Han Li felt somewhat baffled, but he showed none of this on his face, nor did he say anything. After all, he didn't wish to reveal his lack of understanding of the spirit realm as it could arouse suspicion. But during these days, the 4 women treated him with a much friendlier attitude. From his act of saving Quanah, the red-robed woman, they began to enthusiastically call him Big Brother Han. Han Li didn't find the name suitable, but because the women were so young, he found it difficult to be too cold with them. During this time, he spoke much with the girl Quanah in particular. Instead of making brazen inquiries about the spirit realm, he asked many questions about the Heavenly East Enterprise. During these discussions, he came to know that the mistress she mentioned was a regional manager of several cities in the Heavenly East Enterprise and the daughter-in-law of the head of the organization. Normally, one would address her as Mistress Fang. The Heavenly East Enterprise's master had 3 sons. The mistress was officially wed to his 2nd son. They were rather affectionate of one another, but due to an unfortunate accident, her husband died over 20 years ago, but he was survived by 2 young children, a boy and a girl. As such, what should have been governed by the couple was now left entirely by the widow. As for the 4 in the carriage, they were the mistress' personal servants that she adopted from a young age. As a result, the 4 held an extremely deep admiration of the mistress. As for their journey to the remote Yuan city, Lady Fang came here partially for the big business in the city, but it was mostly for her son. Since they found spirit roots in her son at a young age, he joined a cultivation sect located in Yuan city. They had sent a message hinting that there was a matter that required Mistress Fang's assistance. As Mistress Fang still kept her son close in her heart, she made the journey personally and even abandoned that caravan she was traveling with to hurry on her way to the city. In her eyes, with the number of men in the caravan and the few cultivators escorting them, nothing significant could happen to them. She couldn't have expected a horde of low-grade demon worms and a demon serpent to attack the caravan in the azure sifting desert. When Han Li heard this, he began to make indirect inquiries about the master of the Heavenly East Enterprise. After all, founding such a large organization wasn't something an ordinary person could do. Han Li was stunned by what he found out. The master of the organization was a mortal who lacked physical strength, nor did he have any spirit roots. How was such a mortal able to create such a large business? As doubts filled Han Li's mind, Han Li asked an indirect question about it, but as careless as the red-robed woman was, she didn't give a proper answer. When he saw this, he didn't question her any further and promptly changed topics. As this went on, Han Li managed to understand a few things, but he had even more questions as well, leaving him somewhat gloomy. Although the grasslands appeared to be far more expansive desert, the caravan quickly passed through it in a little over a month, but it still hadn't reached the end. During this time, the guards and cavalry remained highly vigilant and fearful. Even the several cultivators that hadn't emerged during the desert would periodically take turns patrolling the air above the caravan. These Gulu mountain cultivators also appeared to be treating this duty with great care. Although these people appeared ready to face a great enemy, the caravan managed to leave the grasslands after another half-month of travel and emerged into a hilly area. The soldiers and cultivators instantly felt relief after leaving the grasslands, and the caravan's original banter immediately returned. Even the young women in Han Li's carriage let out a sigh of relief after leaving the grasslands. The young green-robed woman patted her chest in relief and sweetly smiled, "So we didn't attract the wolves of the plains. Although that wasn't my first time through them, I still feared for my life." Liu sighed and fearfully said, not only was elder sister Xianxia scared, but the entire caravan was holding their breaths. If our luck was any worse, we could have woken a beast tide and that would be the end of us. The plains are truly a death trap. Although it is rarely seen, there are a few merchant enterprises that encounter it. Kwana tilted her head and added, that's right. I heard that a Yuan city didn't hesitate to spend a fortune to our enterprise for over 100 rare spirit tools and a huge number of weapons to deal with a beast tide. The white-robed woman bafflingly said, strangely enough, the city isn't large and it wasn't recently built. How could it place an order for so much equipment? That many spirit tools is something only a mid-sized city would be willing to spend. The blue-robed woman shook her head and lightly said, it doesn't come as a surprise. Even if a group of powerful beasts didn't migrate near them recently, the city encounters a massive beast wave every 1,000 years. Against a massive joint attack of so many beasts, they wouldn't be able to easily block it. That's right. Liu's words are reasonable. Kwana pursed her lips in a smile. Han Li sat in his seat and meditated. But when he heard their conversation about the beast tide, his face began to stir. He recalled what the large scarred man Zhong Qiu mentioned in the azure sifting desert, a scorpion wave. Could these two things be somehow related? But after that, the women dropped the topic and quickly spoke about other things. Although Han Li felt curious, he continued to circulate the Vajra arts and slowly mend his meridians. With that time to mend and the additional undying effects of the wood birth bead, his meridians recovered at a pace far quicker than he anticipated. As of current, his body was in mostly good health. With another month, there shouldn't be a problem at all. As such, with the fourth layer of the Vajra arts cultivated, he suspected that he would be able to win over late Foundation establishment cultivators, given his understanding of mid and low-grade magic techniques. As for core formation cultivators, he would only find out after he's given it a try. Of course, this was assuming that the abilities of low-grade cultivators in the spirit realm were the same as those in the mortal realm. After they left the plane, the caravan arrived at its destination after 2 days, a stone city with an unordinary presence. Looking at it from a distance, one could tell that the stone walls were over 100 meters tall with a 30-meter-tall stone tower placed every 300-meter interval on the wall. It appeared quite imposing. There were also delicate designs carved onto the walls as if they were unfamiliar talisman characters, adding another layer of mystery to the city. Han Li was speechless at the sight of it. The city wasn't comparable to any small city. In the mortal realm, it could be said to be a massive city. But then, Han Li took notice of a few large armored soldiers patrolling the walls. There were also ballistas placed on top of the towers with giant metal arrows ready to fire. Each arrow was over 10 meters long and shined with white light as if they were each low-grade magic tools. Such astonishing weapons would likely be able to kill even fellow Daoist cultivators. Han Li narrowed his eyes at the sight and began to ponder as the caravan arrived at the city gates. There was not the person outside the city gates. They were pitch black and sealed tight. There was a large troop of soldiers on top of the gates though, looking down at the caravan with cautious expressions. The scarred man Zhong Qiu rode his wolf up to the gate and wordlessly tossed an item in his hand up to the gate. It was a golden medallion. The soldiers stirred up on the gate as a middle-aged man in silver armor closely examined it. Afterwards, he took a look at the caravan and commanded, "Open the gates and inspect the caravan. They belong with the Heavenly East Enterprise." Once that was said, the soldiers began to shout with a few of them running down to open the gate. A short moment later, the metal gates slowly opened to reveal tens of fully armed soldiers running out in formation. The silver-armored middle-aged man was the last to arrive. He walked up to Zhong Qiu and vigilantly looked him. "Are you their leader?" Zhong Qiu calmly answered, "I'm Zhong Qiu. You should have received the City Lord's token. We carry the goods that were ordered by the city." "I've received the order, but it is a peculiar time. We'll need to have a few of our esteemed cultivators to examine your caravan before we can let you in." Zhong Qiu readily agreed to their request. "So you fear demon beasts sneak among us? We'll comply with your search, of course." The middle-aged man nodded and turned out, calling out in the direction of the city. "Good. Mr. Li, Master Huang. Please inspect them." Chapter 1274, Temporary Departure. A calm man's voice spoke from the city gate. By command of the city lord, we will assist Officer Zhao. We will naturally offer our services. A white-robed Confucian scholar and a monk of azure Buddhist robes walked out from the city gate. The voice belonged to the scholar. Officer Zhao didn't dare to neglect the cultivators and hurriedly thanked them with a smile. The scholar took out a mirror while the monk took out an alms bowl. After a brief chant and incantation gesture, they tossed the magic tools into the air. Suddenly, the magic tools began to circle in the air. The lens spouted out an azure mist, covering an entire tortoise. As for the alms bowl, it released a yellow light and began to sweep past the wolf cavalryman. In a short span of time, the light from both the magic tools quickly swept through the entire caravan, thoroughly scanning each person present. In the blink of an eye, the 30 carriages and 200 people were inspected without a problem found. Good. You can all enter the city. Ah yes, I must tell you something. Mistress Fang has already made a contract with the largest inn in the eastern city, the Cloud Ease Inn. You may head there after you deliver your goods. Officer Zhao's expression relaxed and he didn't make matters more difficult. After having his say, he waved his hand and signaled them to enter. Zhong Qiu saluted him before leading the caravan into the city. After passing through the gates, Han Li discovered that the city was far larger than he expected. At a glance, the city had an innumerable amount of buildings. He couldn't see the end of them. In addition, the city was well planned when it was constructed. Although the buildings were of different styles and materials used to build them were highly varied, they were evenly arranged with 10-meter-wide stone roads lined between them. Such a large city was naturally bustling with excitement. The streets were filled with people where it was nearly overcrowded. Han Li was stunned at the scene, but he soon discovered most of the people on the streets carried a weapon on them and wore heavy expressions. When the blue-robed woman in the carriage saw this, she sighed and muttered, "It seems the matter about the beast wave is true. Otherwise, the villagers outside wouldn't have all rushed into the city. There is a large pressure on an Yuan city." When Han Li heard this, he came to a sudden realization. With so many people, it would be difficult for the caravan's tortoises to make it through. Fortunately, Officer Zhao had already considered the matter and sent several soldiers to clear a path for them. They forcibly dispersed the crowd to make way. Even so, the tortoise carriages moved slowly. After traveling for almost 2 hours, they eventually made their way past 10 streets and arrived at a street with rarely few people, stopping in front of a decorated archway that was several stories tall. Behind the archway were several heavily guarded storehouses with many armed attendants standing nearby. The following process went exceedingly smooth. The Heavenly East Enterprise handed over their goods to the storehouse officials for inspection. Afterwards, Zhong Qiu received a certificate from them and led the caravan to the west side of the city. Now having restored his ability to move, Han Li made a sudden proposal to Zhong Qiu when they were halfway to the inn. He wanted to explore the city for a bit before meeting back with them. When Zhong Qiu heard this, he frowned. Then after some thought, he agreed and said, "Junior Marshal Brother Han, you've yet to meet the mistress and have yet to officially enter the organization. I won't restrict you much, but you should take note that many shady characters are now present in a Yuan city. It isn't very safe, and there can't be much worth seeing in this small remote city. If you have matters to attend to, I hope you'll return to the inn quickly when you're done." Zhong Qiu may have a fierce appearance, but he spoke with tactful words. Han Li smiled and agreed. Then, he nimbly left them, turning a street corner and disappearing from sight. Zhong Qiu looked in the direction that Han Li disappeared and stroked his chin, wearing a pensive expression. What? Does benefactor Zhong think that Brother Han won't return? Standing at his side, Nan Chizi asked him with a smile. Zhong Qiu wryly laughed and said, "I'm not worried about that, he already signed the blood curse contract. It's only that Junior Marshal Brother Han seems to be a person with a deep history. He's rather mysterious." Nan Chizi smiled and added, "He is so young, yet he was able to cultivate such an astonishing body refinement technique. It is impossible that he came from humble origins. And from his bearing, it is obvious he isn't from the heavenly origin region like us." "Oh, I know that as well. But so long as he doesn't have a relationship with any of the other great powers in the Heavenly Origin region, our Heavenly East Enterprise won't interfere even if he had a problematic history. If we properly nurture this person, it is possible for him to cultivate the 5th layer of the Vajra arts. In that case, he will certainly turn into Mistress Fang's strongest soldier. Zhong Qiu's expression turned heavy. Nanchizi glanced at the scarred man with a mysterious smile. The 5th layer of the Vajra arts? If Benefactor Zhong truly thinks that, he will in existence on even grounds with core formation cultivators. Zhong Qiu chuckled. I am holding my hopes rather high. From how young he is and his current cultivation, the possibility of cultivating to the 5th layer of the Vajra arts still exists. With some luck, he will far exceed common body refiners like me. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been so eager to have him sign a blood curse contract in the Azure Sifting Desert. That's reasonable. All right, enough of that person. The goods have been delivered. That means that Mistress Fang's contract with me and my martial brothers have been fulfilled. We will now take our leave. Nanchizi bowed to them and uttered a few words of farewell. Oh, you won't visit the mistress again? In that case, I hope your travels go well. Failing to keep them any longer, Zhong Qiu bid them a respectful farewell. The Gulu Mountain cultivators promptly left. A soldier to the side looked at the departing cultivators and sadly said, "It is truly a pity. If our enterprise was able to have our own cultivators, it would be great." The scarred man sighed. It is wishful thinking to have our own cultivators. Although our Heavenly East Enterprise is one of the 3 great merchant unions in the Heavenly Origin region, we still struggle to acquire spirit stones every year. It isn't enough to hire cultivators all year round. And chi condensation cultivators possess about the same strength as body refiners like us. There isn't much use in employing them. Foundation establishment cultivators use an astonishing number of spirit stones year-round as well. It is only when our enterprise has a large order that they are willing to spend spirit stones on them. As for core formation cultivators and above, that is something that we can't even consider. High-grade cultivators require rare materials or magic tools that are far beyond what we can afford. Even if our enterprise manages to somehow foster a mid-grade cultivator, they will eventually leave. That is so. Even body refiners like us will immediately depart to dangerous areas when they finish their cultivation, in search of rare medicines that can create spirit roots. After all, when one becomes a cultivator, not only can they cultivate immortal techniques, but their lifespan increases as well. Over the years, it is impossible to know how many funerals we've held for body refiners, yet they still journey outside. The soldier sadly sighed. Zhong Qiu then waved his arm. Enough of that. This has nothing to do with ordinary people like us. Let us return to see the mistress. The soldier immediately shut his mouth. Thus, the party immediately set off, quickly immersing themselves in the busy streets. At that moment, Han Li was standing on a street, looking at the 7 blazing suns in the sky and letting out a gloomy sigh. Ever since he left the azure sifting sands and entered the grasslands, he immediately sensed the astonishing spiritual qi in the air. The spiritual qi in this world was several times greater than what he found in the mortal world. If he was able to find a suitable place of cultivation, it was possible that the spiritual qi could be over a dozen times greater. It is a pity that he already dissipated his nascent soul. The Ice Phoenix's restriction is still present on his body, so he wasn't able to absorb any spiritual qi, leaving him helpless in this regard. He then set his sights on the road and looked around him as he walked forward. The stores on the streets were about the same as he would find in the mortal world, with nothing out of the ordinary. But suddenly, he stopped and looked at a store in front of him. After some hesitation, he entered and looked around. There were tables made of sandalwood that shined with the cold light glinting off the weapons they displayed. This was a store that specialized in weapons. It wasn't very large, only having 2 attendants, but there were many customers that visited this store to begin with. Naturally, the 2 were mortals. When Han Li entered, he saw that despite the store's unremarkable exterior, business was treating them quite well and his heart stirred. When one of the attendants was finished dealing with another guest, he took notice of Han Li and hastily rushed over to him with a smile. "Customer, do you see something you like? Take a look at this gold-plated 9-ring saber. It was forged from black iron. Not only can it cut through metal, but it is rather heavy. It is an ideal weapon for dealing with wolves. The attendant noticed Han Li was eyeing a large ringed saber. It was pitch black and appeared remarkably heavy. Chapter 1275. Earth WM Tendon. I don't have much strength. How could I use such a heavy weapon? Han Li withdrew his gaze and shook his head. Then how about this crescent sword? It is refined from pure copper. Not only is it light, but it is also quite durable. It is a rare high-quality flexible sword. It is too short for me. It'd be inconvenient to use. Han Li rejected it at a glance. Too short. The shop attendant's smile froze as if he wasn't sure how to reply. Han Li took several steps to the side and pointed to an item on the table. What is that over there? That looks interesting. The item he pointed at was a soft pitch-black rope that was as thick as a thumb. When the attendant saw this, he hurriedly explained, "That is the young dragon rope. It is refined from metal threads and is specialized for binding. It can trap low-grade demon beasts of extraordinary strength with ease." Let me take a look at it. Han Li took the item into his hand and shook it. Whoosh! The black rope turned into a perfectly straight stick. When the attendant saw this, his eyes widened. He attended to countless customers for this weapon shop, so he did possess some judgment. Those who can control rope to that degree can't be ordinary. As he determined Han Li was most likely a body refiner, he couldn't help but wear an expression of respect. Han Li waved it a few more times and frowned. This is quite good, but it is still a bit too thick. Do you have anything thinner? The attendant muttered to himself for a moment before answering with an embarrassed expression. Something thinner. I'm afraid this store doesn't have anything like that. Then, a rough voice suddenly spoke from behind him. Oh, you want something thinner? I have something like that. I can let you take a look, but the price won't be cheap. Han Li's expression stirred and he slowly turned around. There were two large men in leather robes standing behind them. One of them had a lofty stature and hair that reached down from his shoulders, giving him a dangerous aura. The other had a sickly complexion and had shriveled skin. The larger man carried a long spear on his back and a huge bag as well. The shriveled man carried a meter-long wooden box in his hand and wore a mysterious expression. Han Li's face lit up when he saw that the two wore rings embedded with spirit stones, but these rings were much cruder than Xianxia's and their spirit stones were somewhat smaller as well. There were body refiners with spirit tools. Having recognized who these people were, Han Li faintly smiled and said, "So long as the item is suitable, the price will be no matter." The shriveled man gave Han Li a probing glance and smiled. "Good, but let's not talk here. Please follow me to a quiet place and we'll continue there." "That will be no problem," Han Li said with a nod. He then followed the two out of the shop. The two appeared quite familiar with the area and soon arrived at an unremarkable alleyway after a few turns. There was no one there and it was completely silent. When the three stopped, "This place will be fine. Little brother Xin, take out the item for him to see." "Of course, big brother Bao." The large man readily agreed and grabbed the bag from his back, giving a big shake. Clangs sounded out as a large pile of items formed on the ground. There was an assortment of items from bottles to beast hides and horns. The shriveled man bent down and took a palm-sized wood box into his hand. "Take a look at this. This is an Earth WYRM tendon that we acquired after killing it with a few other body refiners. Not only is it thin, but it is also incredibly durable and fully flexible. It is rather easy to withdraw and extend." An Earth WM. Han Li didn't know what kind of demon beast this Earth WM was, but it appeared to be a kind of low-grade demon beast. However, he didn't reveal his confusion on his face when he opened the box. He saw a thin yellow object tightly wrapped into a ball by a red rope. Han Li bluntly tugged at the red rope and tore it to pieces. With a pop, the ball of beast tendons flung out and shot at Han Li's face. Han Li raised his hand, but it appeared he was too slow. Nevertheless, He managed to grab an end of the tendons with his fingers and instantly turned it soft and limp with a twist of his fingers. Then, Han Li brought it before his eyes and noticed it was 6 meters long. When the shriveled man saw Han Li's swift actions, he couldn't help but exchange a glance with the large man. At that moment, Han Li was giving the WRM tendon a thorough examination. Having killed a myriad of low-grade demon beasts in the past, he was able to tell the characteristics of the tendon at a glance as well as how it could be used. He fiddled with it a moment longer before shaking it with a single hand. The tendon blurred as it twisted and danced through the air. Then, it coiled around his arm to form a faint yellow bracelet. With that, he rolled his sleeve over it where it was well concealed. Han Li looked at the two and said, "It isn't bad. It truly is a rare material from a low-grade demon beast. Although this item isn't very useful to cultivators and is most suitably used as a bowstring, it is quite useful towards me. So long as you aren't too greedy, I'll agree to your price." The shriveled man's harsh face broke out in a smile and he chuckled. "It appears you really are a body refiner. In that case, we'll settle the bill with spirit stones. I want 30 spirit stones for that tendon." 30 spirit stones? That's a bit high, but I'll pay it. Take it. From his conversation with Liu and the others, he learned that although gold and silver were still used as currency by mortals in the mortal realm, body refiners used spirit stones for notable transactions as they used large numbers of spirit stones in their spirit tools. However, the low-grade spirit stones in the spirit realm weren't nearly as large as those in the mortal realm. Regardless of what the spirit stones were used for, mid and high-grade spirit stones were treated with the most importance. After all, top-grade spirit stone veins were possible in this world due to the greater density of spiritual qi, but most of them belonged to a few high-grade cultivators and superpowers. Even so, 30 low-grade spirit stones was still a bit much for a minor material from a low-grade demon beast. On the day Han Li hid all of his storage pouches and treasures in the desert, he hadn't forgotten the significance of spirit stones in the spirit realm. For the sake of carefulness, he left behind a dozen mid-grade spirit stones on his body just in case. Now, he reached into his robes and tossed a yellow spirit stone over to him. The long-haired man took a step forward and caught it. After he looked at it, he nodded with satisfaction. When the shriveled man saw this, he smiled and took out a small leather pouch. He poured out 70 spirit stones from it and used a beast hide on the ground to wrap them up before tossing it to Han Li. The shriveled man chuckled and said, "Here is your change. Since you are so straightforward, how about we join together if there is a chance? Perhaps there may be an opportunity in the future. But I am preoccupied for the time being, so I must take my leave." Han Li saluted the two with a smile and calmly walked away. When Han Li departed from the alley, the large man looked at the mid-grade spirit stone in his hand and took another look at the alley entrance. An ominous glint flashed from his eye and he softly said, "Big brother Bao, his face is unfamiliar and he is quite wealthy. Should we?" The shriveled man's face sank and he said, "Don't think about it. Didn't you see he wasn't wearing any spirit tools? Body refiners who do this are either too poor, or they feel their cultivation is too high for normal spirit tools to be of assistance. Which one do you think he belongs to?" The large man hesitated and doubtfully said, "This man can't be poor since he was able to take out a mid-grade spirit stone, but why did he buy that WM tendon from us?" The man surnamed Bao was silent for a moment before letting out a cold laugh. "Brother Xin, are you certain he bought the tendon to be used as a weapon? He might have bought it as material to create a particular spirit tool. Currently, a Yuan city is overflowing with body refiners from the outside. There is no lack of those possessing fearsome talent. Although we aren't weak ourselves, it's best that we don't risk it. After all, we only have one life." The shriveled man's words seemed to calm down the large man surnamed Xin, but soon he wore an embarrassed expression and said, "Big brother's words are reasonable. I am being too greedy for spirit stones, but in the upcoming beast tide, if we don't have low and mid-grade spirit stones to replenish our spirit tools, we'll be put in danger." Having already thought of the matter, the shriveled man said, "What are you afraid of? The city lord will surely employ all the body refiners in the city to deal with the beast wave. They'll give us a sum of spirit stones, of course. So long as we save enough, we'll be able to preserve our lives." When the large man heard this, his spirits were roused. "That's right. According to the agreement between the 3 sovereigns and the 7 demon kings, cultivators at the core formation stage and above aren't allowed to assist large cities in blocking beast waves. If they wish to protect the city, who else do they have to rely on aside from us? The shriveled man sighed. So long as you know. In truth, the agreement also stated that the beast wave can't have any demon beasts higher than grade 5 as well. It is hard to say who has more to gain from the agreement. The large man then remained silent in thought. Not long after, the 2 put away the items on the ground and walked back to the main street where they disappeared into a sea of people.